A reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, beginning at the first verse. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, and, assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly, and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And, going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh, and, being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. There's a question which lies behind this passage, and it's simply this: who, in this passage, is the true king? Now, one answer, of course, to that question is Herod himself. He is, after all, the king of the Jews at that stage. A puppet king of Rome, yes, but nonetheless, he was a king, and he lives in a palace. But the wise men have their own question. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? So rather than Herod, we start to see the focus turn into somebody else, a child who has been born as the King of the Jews. And that is something which would have got Herod's attention. Don't forget, Herod has a history of killing people who are a threat to him. In fact, Herod had killed some of his own children in order to protect his throne. So this is a dangerous question. But we know, because right at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is referred to as the son of David. And when we have the genealogy, well, David is the only one in that genealogy who is called king, as if to make the point that here is King David, and in his genealogy, well, there is Jesus. So the question comes back again. Who is the true king here? Who is the rightful heir? Now, for the Jews, of course, there was no better king than King David. He authored some of the Psalms. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but nonetheless he was seen as a man who was after God's own heart and was a great general who had expanded the borders of Israel. He'd conquered Jerusalem, which until he came to the throne had been unconquered. He united the 12 tribes under him, and his dynasty was established by a covenant. We read in 1 Samuel 7, And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. Forever. But 500 years later, the monarchy spluttered when the Babylonians conquered them. But nonetheless, there was a prophecy there too. Isaiah. But in that day the root of Jesse, who is the father of David, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Now that's interesting. Of him the nations shall inquire. Think of the Magi here. We'll come back to that. And we read in Jeremiah further prophecies. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he shall reign as king and deal wisely, and shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. Or, further on in Jeremiah, in those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness for the land. So we have all these prophecies that Davidic line, that line of kings which goes back to David, will be restored. So who is the true king? Is it Herod, who is a Roman puppet king, or is it Jesus, who is of the tribe of Judah, but more crucially, is of the lineage of David? Is it an Idumean, Herod, or somebody born in Bethlehem, David's own village, from whence he will come? And this village from whence David came is also a village that's concerned in a prophecy of the Messiah to come, the one of David's line to come, a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel, as Micah puts it. So we have redolence here, we have richness here, we have prophecies pointing towards Jesus coming as king of somebody else from David's line, and we have another king, though, on the throne, in the way, the Roman puppet. This question, by the way, of the kingship of Jesus is there all the way through this gospel. Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus was asked at his trial. And finally, at his crucifixion, the sign affixed above his head. This is Jesus, King of the Jews. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But there's irony here, because the Jews reject this king of the lineage of David, but the Magi don't. The Magi came, yes, Gentile wise men, they came, but they came to seek the king of the line of David. They came to seek the one who had been born King of the Jews. Not the one sat on the throne, but the one who had been born King of the Jews. And there's further irony. It was the Gentile centurion at the cross who proclaimed Jesus to be the Son of God. So we have here this setting up of the wise men seeking the true king, and Herod, the puppet king, in the way. We have a setup between the Gentiles being led by God to understand the significance of Christ, and the Jewish king seeking to kill him, as we'll see further and later on. But back to that star again. Has that got any resonance? Has that got any Old Testament background? Well, it does. In Numbers 24:17 we read, "A star shall come out of Jacob, and a sceptre," which you would hold if you're a king, "shall rise out of Israel." And so here we find a star and a sceptre. We find this omen, if you like, of a king coming up out of Jacob. Yet more, Psalm 72, a psalm of Solomon, reads, "May he have dominion from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. May desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust." And listen to this. Solomon continues, "May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Seba bring gifts. May all kings fall down before him, and all nations serve him." So we have yet more prophecies of people coming from afar to bow down and to worship. And the gifts? Well, we find that too in Isaiah 60. "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will be seen upon you. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. A multitude of camels shall follow you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba shall come, and they shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord." Here again we find a star. Your light has come, as Isaiah puts it, and people with gold and frankincense. Gold, the sign of royalty. Gold, the metal that doesn't tarnish, that is eternal. Frankincense, the vital ingredients of incense, showing worship of a deity. And myrrh? Well, that may be for making incense, but rather more ironically, rather more richly, it is also a spice used for burials. The divine King, you see, was set to die. The shadow of the cross falls across the crib. So these Gentile wise men coming with their gifts and bowing down before Christ, they are fulfilling Old Testament prophecies, and various prophecies from various prophets come and converge upon Christ. The one from the royal line who is both divine and human, the one whose death will restore those who trust in God to the God in whom they trust. And so this passage asking who is the true King asks that not only of the initial readers of Matthew, but of us also. Who is our King? Before whom will we bow down and worship? Christ is presented to us as that one true King. And will you bow down and worship him?